Yeah, cool. Welcome to the Back to Your Best Rehab podcast. Today we have Zane Bormann on. Zane, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dan.
We've been working for a while together, so it's cool to have you on and to get your experience as both a patient or someone dealing with pain, but a little bit more importantly, someone who works in more the performance side of things and works as a coach with people in pain as well. So if you want to start, maybe just tell the listeners a bit about yourself, and then we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah, so obviously our journey together we've been together, I think, 2 years now, since we started, and before that's obviously quite a journey leading up to it. I joined the Air Force at 17, so back in 2010, I joined the Air Force and did 12 years of service in that. And that led to, my first knee injury was 2011, which was, a meniscal repair, and then turned into a reconstruction and more surgeries further down on that knee as well. I had spine surgeries for some like nerve ablations and multiple torn rotator cuffs, and including like disc prolapses in my neck and lower back and that as well. So I've pretty much experienced top to bottom pain, debilitation, and everything that goes alongside with it. And it wasn't until I saw a physio in Tyndall, Katherine, Northern Territory of all places, that got me into strength training as a means for recovery and rehab. And this was around 2000, I think 17, 18, I started working with Sam, and he told me that we would do a powerlifting competition to rehab some of my neck and spine issues. I thought this guy was nuts. Like, I can't even unrack a bar. And we did that. I think about 7 or 8 months work between Sam and my strength coach Damon at the time. And we actually got to deadlifting, squatting and bench pressing again. And that was kind of my introduction into how powerful strength training is in the rehab world. And then further on from that, I ended up competing in bodybuilding again in 2021, which I never thought I would ever be able to do again after a 2015 season, just with the injuries that I had and not being able to train properly, and pain being one of the biggest limiting factors of my life. At one point, I even lost use of my right hand, limiting after the nerve issues in my neck. Couldn't open doors or anything like that. And, stuff like that is, you think things are pretty much over. You don't know if you're going to get that back. And so many unsuccessful nerve surgeries as well. Like, my back surgery didn't work. Didn't fix the pain, didn't fix any of the issues that I was having. And then that comes to working with you a couple of years ago. I remember I wanted to get back into, I wanted to squat again, low bar squat. Again, I haven't been able to for years because of the pain that I was experiencing. I remember after your first consult, and I've worked with a lot of rehab people, a lot during my time in the Defence Force. And your consult was kind of the first time that I felt, I reckon I'll actually be able to do this again. Felt very confident. And that's where I got into the Back to Your Best program with you, and I loved it.
And then became a coach in it.
And then I loved it so much that when I graduated, I decided, well, I'll coach it for 6 or 7 months. I think I did. I remember I was only meant to be like 3 months, and I just couldn't leave.
Yeah, it's funny how it evolves a bit like that. And then you get to be the person, when you become the coach after doing it, you get to resonate really well, and you can kind of see people's journeys from a bit of a different lens.
Perspective. And I just felt that I could help so much as well, having done that program, having gotten so far through it, and being able to relate to them on an empathetic scale as well, of like just understanding them, not just some personal trainer who's graduated high school and he's got a good given programs. Like, there's a lot of emotional support that you can give people with experience.
Let's dive in on that a little bit, because you're a coach now, strength and conditioning coach. You work with a lot of powerlifters and bodybuilders and people in pain as well. Dig a little bit into that emotional side of training first. Because I think when working with people in pain, my experience as a clinician is that almost more of it is about supporting people through that journey, helping them stay positive when things are tough and celebrating when things are going really well, and trying to kind of just keep them on track, because there are a lot of lows along that journey. So tell me about your process, how you work with your clients in that kind of more emotional respect.
Yeah, so obviously with that pain side of things, and this is something that I went through with the help of a psychologist many years ago, was that when you perform at a higher level, whether you're powerlifting, bodybuilding, just general gym lifting, and you've got pain, you've got restriction, you've got injury, there is a mourning process that you actually have to go through. And I don't think that's fully understood, is that you've lost something. If you're heavily involved in sport, in fitness, and in the relationship that gives you, because it makes us feel good and it helps us achieve, when we lose that, we've got to understand that we're actually in some form of a mourning process. So a big part of what I like to do with my coaching aspect is that I don't like the word fix, but I can't fix these people. It's not like I'm not a rehab professional. I'm not there to give them function back or anything like that. But what I do is I help them train in a capacity that works with their injuries, so that they can get something back that they actually love doing. And a lot of times in those aspects, now that they're training again and working again, we help their pain a lot. But that's where our collaboration comes in as well. And that's why I collaborate with so many health professionals, whether it be dietitians, psychologists, or yourself as a rehab professional, to complete that team. And that emotional aspect of giving someone back something they've enjoyed to do again, they can actually train again, they can move in a certain way again. And even that aspect of like, yeah, I've got a team. I've got a rehab professional that works alongside with my coach. I've got a dietitian that works alongside my coach. So they get this immense amount of support as well as just, you know, the ability to train in a way again that suits them.
Yeah. And I think just one of the biggest therapeutic benefits of just keeping people doing what they enjoy within their capacity, I think that plays a tremendous role in their recovery as well. I sometimes think that is almost more important than the little nuanced kind of rehab type things that we do. I think keeping people in the game and allowing them then to see progress and kind of they can see their journey back to where they want to get to is as big a part of that rehab and recovery process as anything else, if not bigger. And I think sometimes people make the mistake, they might not have a coach, say like yourself, or they kind of just pull themselves completely out of that environment, whether it be, you know, training or whatever it might be. And that's a big problem because then they're not on that process of getting back to where they get to, where they want to get to. That just doing what you need to do within the capacity that you can, that's guided by a good coach, is number one to get back to top performance or just get back to where you'd like to get to.
Exactly. And especially when you're talking things like deconditioning, like if you've got someone who trains at quite a high level and they've got injury and they stop training altogether, they're probably going to end up worse. They're deconditioning these muscles, these other structures that have been doing such an incredible job for them for so long. And a lot of the times they just need a slight refocusing and a little bit of time.
Yeah.
It's
we
often
often say
quite not a big deal, but not a big deal in the actual structural side of things. It just means taking a slight step back. It's the journey's not over, but obviously in our heads of having this injury, and sometimes the information we might get from health professionals is, oh, you need to rest, you need to stop doing everything. And the follow on from that can sometimes be worse than maybe just moving at RPE 5 for a week.
Yeah, the danger of that, the danger of being told to stop what you're doing completely is way worse. And I think that's where it leads into things like kinesiophobia, which is that kind of fear of movement. If you're told to stop doing something and you do stop doing something, it creates a degree of fear about doing the thing you want to do. But when you can work within the capacity of where you're at, so like you were describing before, I think it eliminates a lot of that fear, or at least it mitigates a lot of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So in regards, coming back to your experience with pain and obviously having the knowledge you have as a coach as well, when you were going through your process of getting back to bodybuilding or powerlifting, pick whichever time, what was going through your head? What do you kind of tell yourself when you go through some of the lows of returning to the lifting?
It's so important to have someone who's who's thinking about the big picture. And I think, and that's where I relied heavily on my coach and stuff. We talk about, I think, like my return to bodybuilding for me was probably my big one. So I've always loved bodybuilding. I never wanted to stop doing it, but I didn't know how. And I had some pretty freaking awesome coaches during that piece there. So just to be able to rely on someone to look at the bigger picture and where you're at now, and they know the journey, and they were saying, yeah, you are where you need to be. And, you know, we can work towards these things, just a setback. This is how we can manage it. And managing setbacks, managing things like that for us, managing injuries in that, and being supported probably was the big thing that got me to the stage in the end. And even during when I was getting to the stage, I was going through my medical discharge in the Air Force's time. So stress was insanely high. But knowing that you could achieve that journey, and even though I wasn't at the absolute best I possibly could have been for that season, it was the stepping stone for my next seasons, knowing that I can do this, even if have these many injuries, this much pain, I can push my body to that limit and I can maintain it. What can I do with a few more years with even more experience behind me?
Yeah. A much longer time frame mindset by the sounds of it.
Yeah. And it's about the big picture and just knowing that things take time.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something there that's really important, which is having somebody to tell you that you are where you're meant to be can be very, very helpful in that process, because it can often just feel like a journey and you have no idea whether you're right at still just at the beginning or you're close to the end. So it's a bit of a dark journey for the most part. But if you've got somebody there who's either been there before or who has maybe, been down that path themselves, it's really nice to sometimes hear, hey, you're doing everything you can, everything is spot on. Where you are right now is fantastic. Where you're going to be in 12 months will be a different.
Yeah. And my coach at the time, they were both veterans. They were both experienced the military life. They had both been injured quite to a high level as well. And they're extremely successful bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they got to I knew that journey was possible because they were doing it.
Did you have a particular mindset through all those years that changed? Like, did you notice kind of your self-talk maybe early in your injuries and pain when you're back in defense versus like where you are now is different?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that comes down to the roles that we were playing as well with career-wise. I really love what I do now every single day, where I think at that back end of defense there, coming into some of the PTSD side of the things is I blamed them for my injuries. I would blame them for where my mindset was. I had quite a negative association with what I was doing, which doesn't. And then even if you look at the processes involved in that prep, it was more of a case of doing it because they said I couldn't, not because I thought it was the best thing for me. So, and don't get me wrong, negativity can be a powerful tool, but it's not a sustainable tool. So it was very exhausting to do that. So doing that, then what I do now, I know that everything I do is based on not a relief-based goal, getting through this just so it can be done. Everything that I do now is associated with an enjoyment of the process, of the tasks that we do, and so much more of the journey than the outcome. So being, that mindset there is completely different. And that comes down to environmental maturity and that kind of stuff as well. Also just working with clinicians and other people that are supportive of the journey. And I can't say I really had that in the military side of things. They're very much about just getting you well enough to do the task at hand and not so much about what's happening in the future. But that's the military though. You're there to serve a purpose. You're deployable and that's your role at the end of the day. But it just, how I correlated that with my own rehab journey probably wasn't the healthiest at the time compared to what it is now.
I think that ties back to what we were speaking about earlier as well, of just keep working to, doing the thing that you want to do. If you can avoid it, don't pull yourself out of whatever it is your goal is, because that's going to keep that enjoyment and keep that more positive and optimistic relationship with pain as well. And so what are some of the successes you've had so far? Tell me a bit about kind of your competition-based stuff and those side of.
Yeah, so I did that first powerlift competition and I think it was 2020, which was just a local one, amateur one. There wasn't that many people, but for me it was big just because I managed to actually do it. I think I squatted and deadlifted 165 at the time, which at the time I was stoked about because, I only had back nerve surgery within 12 months ago. So I was pretty happy with that one. But I think my biggest one happy for me was standing on stage in 21, just to be able to push my body to actually survive a prep again and go through that process, still having injuries, still managing all that, but to maintain my strength, be in a really good place mentally. I'd pain managed quite well. And when you're that lean, your body knows about it and it doesn't love it. But to be able to actually compete again, to pose relative pain free was fantastic. And then I've just continued that up on from even there. I went to compete last year. I thought I could compete with a newborn. Didn't really pan out. I still got it quite lean. And I was doing and this is when I was working heavily with you. I wanted to do classic physique, which focused heavily on the posing atmosphere of things. And all the work we were doing, I could sit into deep lunges in the splits and pose and move my thoracic spine again, which I couldn't do for quite an amount of time, and actually hit some of these poses that I'd never thought I'd do. And I remember being very inspired by Leah at the time because she was prepping and doing that posing and that as well. She had a very similar backstory to why she struggled with posing and struggled with the bodybuilding side of things. So it was very inspiring to watch her go through it as well. And then from there, I just think it comes to the coaching side of we're building that relationship. Obviously, I've had with you to help with the rehab approach of things and just getting clients like Christy and Sakali, who we've worked with for quite a long time, and coming from multiple knee reconstructions. Sakali, for example, couldn't even bodyweight squat when we started. And both these girls are squatting over 120 kilos, pulling 140 to nearly 150 deadlifts off the ground. And I think both from benching at about 70 kilos plus in powerlifting. And they thought that career for them was over and would never happen. So that's some really big highlights for that for me, just to be able to get people back to doing what they want to do and at such a high level as well, which is just very exciting. Christy's going to compete sanctioned soon, which, for her, when she thought she'd never powerlift again, is awesome.
Oh, yeah. And to see where Christy's at, I was watching some of her lifts the other day, and the quality is just out of this world to think about where she was 12 months ago to now.
She couldn't even conventional. At that point. She couldn't touch the bar. And now we're looking very strongly at a 150 kilo deadlift in this next comp in August.
Just amazing. I mean, that's just that power of that consistency and working through the pain, but still staying on track with where you want to kind of get to there.
Yeah. And that's it, too, is they're workhorses. All these people and when you've got these chronic injuries and pain things, you've kind of got to work harder. Yeah. It doesn't mean you need your sessions to take twice as long or anything. It's just you've really got to work if you want to achieve at that high point.
I think about this quite often, actually, about why is it that some people will have some kind of pain or injury, generally something quite chronic, and they will take on their rehab and their training so well and stick with it for as long as they need to stick with it. And other people maybe kind of just start, but then for whatever reason decide that, their career and whatever it is over. And I actually asked a patient the other day, just on Friday, in fact. She just did her first Ironman and was dealing with a whole lot of issues. And I said to her, I said, tell me about, we've worked together for 6 months. She ran through the Back to Your Best, just finished the other day. And we got her to the Ironman. And I said, what is it about your, do you think you had something inherently in your mind that you could achieve this thing? Because it's a big thing, the Ironman, to achieve when you come from a background of pain and injury. And some people would never even consider doing something like that in pain, let alone without pain. No one, it's a crazy thing to do. It's a very impressive thing to do. But it gets me thinking a lot about what, and this is where I'd like your opinion as well. Like what do you think it is that some of these people have mindset wise around their pain? Do you think inherently they just believe that their body's adaptable and, with the right approach, they'll get better? Or do you just think it's a pure love for whatever it is they want to do that keeps them driven?
I think it's a multiple things. I think the love for something too is going to do it. Some people I know are just incredibly freaking stubborn and they refuse to let anything get in their way. But some people, and I've heard this one a couple of times, and this is probably my experience as well, and it's why we value strength or value the performance world so much, is that they know what it feels like to not be able to do it. Nearly to feel a little bit helpless, to feel like they can't do something. And then when you've got the opportunity that you can, you don't want to lose that. You don't want to take that for granted. You want to keep chasing it. And if you're doing better, feeling better, and still achieving your goals, and you're overcoming something, there's something so much more rewarding to what you've achieved. And that's what I've seen from most people is they know what weakness feels like, they know what helplessness feels like, and they'll never go back to that.
Do you think that's because they've trained before, then developed an injury, and so they kind of know what they were now versus where they are?
Yes and no. So some people definitely. But some people, they've done that before, so they know where they were at and where they're at now. And some people have just been in pain for so long, and then they get the ability to do something they thought they couldn't, and they went, "This is powerful. I feel strong."
Yeah,
and
completely.
that they don't want to lose that. I don't want to feel like that again.
It's such a powerful thing. Like you and I understand it because we've both been through some pain and come out the other side, and you can kind of see your body's adaptable. But I think it's such just an interesting topic, I guess, around where people's minds are at, whether they're driven because they've been at a level before and now they want to get back to there, or that they're just so sick of being told that they can't do something. There's that degree of stubbornness that drives them, or whether it's just being so sick of not being able to do things they'd like to do. Like we had a guy the other day and he said basically these exact words was, just sick of being told that I got to be careful when I'm doing the garden work, or I got to be careful if I want to do some weights at home. Just feels like he's always being wrapped in bubble wrap from his partner and his friends and everybody. And now he's so sick of it. He's like, I just want to go and lift weight and I want to be confident in my body. And that is his driving factor, which again is another fascinating bit of the psychology behind it all.
Yeah, I work with a young girl. She's only 21. She's just about to graduate as a vet student. So, incredibly driven girl just on the study side of things. And she had multiple lower disc back bulges. And doctor said, worst disc bulges I've ever seen in a 21-year-old, which is something that I absolutely hate that when someone says, you're the worst case I've ever seen, because it does not fill them with confidence that they're ever going to get better. And she wanted to start with me to do powerlifting kind of stuff. Doctor wasn't that keen on it. She went, I'm sick of feeling weak. Let's do it. She's now squatting over 100 kilos and lifting well over 130. She's running 5Ks again, doing all the stuff the doctor said she'll never do. And so that came down to she was just a driven person that didn't want to hear no. And she hasn't had back pain or a back spasm in 6-7 months.
It's amazing. Yeah. And you just, you reflect on that and you go, that's just truly amazing. And 7 months, I mean, it's not even over a lifetime. That's barely a drop in the ocean. And a lot of people can achieve, I mean, we run our programs on minimum 6 months, but 6 months you can improve a tremendous amount. You'll need a little bit more sometimes, but for the most part, you commit to that bit of time, you can turn your entire health and body around quite significantly, start to get that momentum that then leads into the years and years of good, healthy training habits with maybe minimal pain.
And that's it. And a lot of times just creating these habits, and you'll see this a lot with people that come from team sport backgrounds. I see a lot of footy players, bad knees, bad backs, and they get into the gym just so they can do something to help because they've always been in a lot of the fitness. And that's why they seem to get into bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and all these solo sports, is because they've got bung knees, bung backs. If you have a look at bodybuilding, powerlifting, and Olympic lifting, they're all busted. A lot of them started that way because this gave them some control back,
Huge
and they
amount.
just never let go.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me a bit about when you work with a client and say you guys are starting out and maybe they've got some degree of pain or injury. What's your general advice for them?
A lot of when we start with that, I always want to know kind of where they're at mentally with it. Do they actually believe that they can feel better? And what's their goals? What do they want from this? It's like, what do they really want to get out of training or out of this kind of thing? And then from there, I don't actually ever use the word pain much after that. I always ask how they're feeling, how the body's moving, how's this kind of go, how does this feel? I don't like to dwell on the word pain because when we think about it, it's all we can focus on. We look at see what their goals are doing. And then my kind of approach to it when we're doing their testing is I like to see what can you and can't you do and where do we go from there? So just because someone has said, oh, I've got a little disc bulge. Okay, sweet. Does that mean you can't bend over? Can you not squat? Is it lateral movement that we can't do? Can you not twist? And then my approach is let's find what you're shit at and let's get good at it. That's essentially my approach to a lot of that. And then go through expectations of, yeah, you might have spasms in that and you're probably going to keep having spasms, but they might go from 2 weeks to 1 week to 2 days to the next day they're gone. And I kind of do my approach on that, have a look at what they're feeling. And if I feel that they are at a point where they're maybe too early in the strength training world, that's where we have our referral network. And I say, yeah, look, you're probably a little bit out of my scope here and what we need. And then that's where I like to work together with you. And as you know, with our approach, it's that we communicate forward and back what the client needs. And if your approach is working on stability or maybe movement or explosive power side of things, I work on a strength specific side. And if you're focusing on the strength side, I'll start incorporating more stability side so the client's still getting that full picture of everything. So yeah, the client stuff with me, I mean, it's a minimum of 12 weeks to work with me in that regard. And a lot of the time it's just basically get them to move again. Let's get you to squat, hinge, push and pull comfortably again. And then we just keep dialing down on what needs to work and what needs to work. And just working in that multi-plane movement as well, like staying out of the sagittal plane all the time and actually spending some time in that frontal and transverse plane. And that when I started working more with powerlifters, I did not realize just how important that was to working.
It's, I mean, when you get into even from a rehab perspective, going back to what you just said, our clinical approach is more or less the same, which is, what are your goals? I'm not too fussed on your scan, so long as you don't need to be an emergency in the next 24 hours. I'm not too fussed. But let's just start with where you're at. Let's run through a simple assessment and then let's just build from there. That's in line with your goals. So it's very much, I love bodybuilding and powerlifting and those sides because it's very similar to kind of that rehab process in regards to how people progress all the way through. And then I think on the working in different planes front is super important. And it's just movement variability. It just gives the body and the brain a new way to move and a new kind of movement skills, if we can call them that, to learn and develop new neural pathways, which helps tremendously from a confidence standpoint and obviously from a physical development standpoint as well. It just kind of feeds really well into most of the other standard exercises that we do. And so once you've got their mindset, you've put a program in place. These are, say, with people with injuries. Say someone has a flare up or something along those lines. What does that look like for you?
So flare-ups, when we're looking at that, is obviously we have that conversation. I normally revisit that conversation of how's the flare-up doing, how you're feeling, what hurts, that kind of stuff. And especially if they're having their flare-up in the gym or they've had it during that, I always just say, well, let's look at what caused it. I love it if my clients record things for me because I can kind of have a look at the video and see if we can see where something may have broken down in the training or did they just wake up with it? Like, depends on where the flare-up's coming from. But I've got some programs built into my app that anyone can access. They're on demand, and it is actually loosely quite based off the Andrew Locke Base 5 with progressions and regressions of that, because it's a multi-plane set of exercises that you can progress and regress as you need. And I say just jump into these because it's going to do some glute work, there's going to be some old back work, there's some shoulder work, this kind of covers the entire body and a little bit of mobility in there as well. And sometimes just doing that is enough to calm down that nervous system with a little bit of gentle movements and say, where are we feeling after this? And even a little thing, if I go, oh, get into the side plane, can you it's super triggering? You're like, oh, well, we're dealing with something a little bit frontal plane here. And that can kind of help us progress to go, do we need to regress or progress the amount of work we're doing in this? And from there, so we just talk through that. And I'm a big fan of don't just ditch everything. Can we lower the RPE for the week and just go through the motions? Because that just helps your body move, which is what it needs. And then we can also work on you still being doing the gym, going through your program and not fearing those movements just because something was, a little bit painful one day. If that was the case, if we can go through and just move the body maybe with a bit of flexion or extension, you can go, it's not that bad. I can still do this.
Yeah. The question I'd love to hear your opinion on, which is the kind of technique and injury kind of question, as in how important is technique in your world in regards to injury prevention or injury reduction, we might call it, or, versus, say, for example, just a poorly created program that's just too much too soon or just too heavy. Where do you think, if you had to kind of put them priority wise, do you think it's more technique based or more kind of load based in your experience?
It's definitely load based. So it's to a degree on both. So technique, I believe, matters so much more when your capacity, when you look at your work capacity. So if you're working at RPE 9s to 10s, technique really fucking matters because you're putting the body under its maximal load, its maximal threshold. If there's a weak point where it's going to give, it's going to be there. So technique at that point, it matters. And I believe technique is a range as well. I think technique has ranges to the left of right of where you need to be. And your body is really good at working that out. And part of your job as a coach is to work out how does that technique suit the client. So just because your technique looks different to theirs doesn't mean it's wrong. That's just how that works for them. And then they have ranges of that technique. And then from there, that's where your programming comes is to go, well, do they have a weak upper back, a week here? And if they've got some weaknesses, you work on that, the accessory stuff in your program anyway. But programs too, that I believe it comes down to that capacity as well, is that your client has to have the actual ability to do the program you give them. And if you're talking injury space, if you've got way too much work at way too much load, and they're not getting the chances to actually recover and their diet's not managing it, then you're just lining up for injury. Programs should taper and periodize with what the client needs. And that takes in consideration life factors, environmental factors, nutrition factors, and everything. I think people that say technique is the one thing that's going to cause an injury is no, you can get into doing anything. Environmental stresses are probably even, I reckon environmental stress is probably one of the biggest causes of injury more than anything.
Do you think it's just due to the fatigue factor that often comes with that?
Yeah, because you're pushing something to its maximum capacity. And if you're mentally fatigued from other things and other aspects in your life and you're not quite on game day ready, I mean, that's where the body starts exposing weaknesses and we push that threshold and that's where injuries happen. And then I've had a client that ruptured his, well, who's our client, he ruptured his pec there. There was nothing wrong with that bench. It was underloaded. His program was quite underloaded as well. We were working up and it just happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes shit happens too. Yeah. It was just one of those days where no one expected it to happen. It just did.
I remember chatting to him as well. And it's like, just things happen sometimes and for no apparent reason. And it just was what it was. Yeah.
I think it's a mixture of everything, but I don't think you could put a finger on one thing.
No, I completely agree. And that's kind of my opinion a lot of the times as well, which is technique matters really when it matters. And that's often when you're really pushing your maximal ability in something. Obviously, you got to practice your technique all the way through those different loads because you've got to be as prepared as you can be for those, 80, 90, 100% efforts. But definitely our experience in the clinic is, one of my favorite questions to ask people when they get injured is, tell me what else is going on in your life right now. And 8, 9 out of 10 times, they will have something quite significant happening, assuming it's not just like some poor programming that usually is quite obvious to pinpoint. But if it's not poor programming, it is often that they've got some degree of either acute stress or kind of accumulative type stress that's going on in their world. And they push it just a little bit hard on that day. And, whatever got injured. But it is often easy to kind of like look back a little bit and go, hey, your sleep's been, pretty poor lately. Your stress has been up a little bit. Your nutrition's been a bit out. And now we've done this program, which you've done, for the last month or so. But, this particular rep injured you. It's much easier to look back and say, hey, all these little factors that by themselves, I don't think individually, they're probably not, the cause. But when you throw a bunch of them together over a period of time, it just adds more and more stress on the system, meaning that it's not going to cope as well through those lifts.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's stress is the cumulative at the end of the day. And this is what I tell some of my clients as well. We can only control so many variables, like workplace stress, home and stress. There's certain stresses we can't control. But training and dieting are variable stresses. So if we've got a high amount of stress in other parts of their life, we can actually pull back on training or we can pull back on dieting and maybe increase calories, and we can actually reduce stress in other ways that sometimes really help with the injury management side of things. That's that controlling your variables style thing. We can't control everything, but we can control training output, we can control load, and we can control your input, your dietary.
Yeah. It can be challenging as well. I've found in the past, sometimes people use their training as their, as their their stress management strategy, which sometimes is a bit of a double-edged sword because, You got to really try hold them back a little bit when their stress is pretty high. But at the same time, that's their thing that they really want to do, and that's what helps them manage that stress as well. Do you find when you've got people, do you ever preemptively action on these things? If they're not sleeping well, they complain to you that they're a bit tired or stressed, is it something that you'll address with them early and just say,
Yes.
hey, why don't we modify these things? What's your approach
Very
there?
very specifically with bodybuilders, I would go even in deeper detail. With powerlifters, their deloads are programmed in. So when they're working up to these higher loads, their volume decreases, the amount of exercise they do decrease. If they're getting close to the competition, we try to pull them out from being in deficit phases to maintenance, if not slight surplus phases, depending on weight categories, to actually put them in less stress. With bodybuilding, it's a little bit different, just because we've got a physique goal and you're offering in like, especially in prep seasons, you are really focusing on you're kind of not in a comfortable place. But I've got a traffic light system that I use for my preps. And that's where they actually record the amount of stress, their performance, their motivation, their hunger levels, and all this kind of stuff. They record that alongside with their weights and their calorie input, body weight as well. And we can kind of see trends where are we seeing a shift from greens to reds from a 1 to 5 system with hunger, motivation, and soreness. Body weight's starting to look a little bit higher. So we're clearly holding a little bit of inflammation there. Maybe it might be time to take a low capacity week or take a complete week, a complete systemic deload even from that point, and just program that in, because we can kind of see those factors coming through. Or there might be time for them to have a refeed. Look, we've been dieting for a while. It might be time for a maintenance break, a diet maintenance break, or a refeed. Pop things up a little bit, and then we can manage that side of the stress as well. Then that's going to have a big impact on strength losses through management and stuff during bodybuilding preps. So I would say I don't plan for them, but I expect them.
Yeah.
And we can foresee it coming with tracking those metrics.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that way we can have a more preventative approach than a reactive approach, because a reactive approach is no good here because it's too late.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talk, a lot of people don't have coaches. More like, they don't work one-on-one with a coach. They might go to a gym and be in a class setting and things like that, but it's very hard to individualize anything there. Obviously, that's not the intent in a class-based settings, but one of the things we talk about a lot is what are your training decisions? What are the things you're doing if you know you're being stressed or you're sleeping poorly or things are going on in your world, yet your mindset is to keep pushing, all the time. Every time you go to the gym and you're part of your CrossFit class, whatever it might be, it's 10 out of 10 effort every single time, and keep going through those same injury cycles. And then you look back on them and you go, hey, like you keep making the same, training decisions all the way through. We got to kind of have different gears here to work through. We got to have periods where we're deloading a little bit when stress is high. We got to have periods where we can push because life's pretty good and easy. But without a coach, it can be really difficult to dial into that.
You got to learn auto-regulation, which is a hard concept to understand if you've never been taught it. Yeah. But being able to regulate those points and go, I don't have an 8 out of 10 in me today, but I do have a 6 out of 10. And so you're still going to get some foundational skill work. You're still going to move. You're still part of the process, but you just might not hit the numbers that you wanted to. So learning how to regulate that stress and just see how things are feeling. Like if you're getting through all your warm-ups and all your warm-ups feel like absolute hell, and you're meant to do like 5 reps at 60 and you did one that was pretty rough, today's not the day to chuck that extra weight on the bar, is it? Like your body has told you that it's not there. And learning to actually read your own signs is probably a big one. Learning how to regulate by yourself and go, yeah, maybe not today.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important part, especially from a long-term training perspective. Like if your goal is to be in the gym for as long in your life as you'd like to be, if you don't learn that skill, you're either going to burn out at some point, injure yourself, or you're not going to make it too far down your life journey in that. And it becomes a skill set that over time you become more and more refined at. I know when we have experienced lifters come to the clinic and you just listen to them, they're hyper aware. They're hyper aware of how their body feels, or if they, lay down, start to get into their bench and they just feel like it's just not there for whatever reason, something's just not quite right. They will take action and peel back on that day. And likewise, they'll do the reverse on those days that feel great. Even if they're meant to be lighter, they'll push because they just feel like things are aligning that day and things are feeling really good. But they've got this like amazing nuance to their body over time. And that's what I think obviously keeps them in the game for a long period of time. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is around sustainable long-term training, because obviously a lot of people want to be healthy for the long term. 12 weeks is, good start, a good way to start for sure. But ultimately, we want to keep people fit, strong, and healthy for the majority of their life. So, what's your kind of advice for people around long-term sustainable training?
Not trying to do everything at once. You've got to do everything. Everything has its time and place. I work with a lot in fat loss clients as well, and a big thing I teach them is that fat loss is not a life sentence. It has its time and place. You shouldn't always be prepping for a competition. You shouldn't always be trying to rep max, and you shouldn't always trying to be in a fat loss phase. Everything has time and place. So if you're starting off fresh, that means don't try to hit 5 gym sessions, 10,000 steps, and do some stupid calorie deficit straight off the bat. You'll burn out within ridiculous times. Do things in stages. Do things you enjoy is probably a big one, like actually getting there. And if you do, and like when we are working the injury space and all that kind of stuff, try and line your program and training and goal up with your original goal anyway. Just adapting as you go with the injury space. Because all high level lifters, they've all got injuries. And a lot of them carry those into competitions. So we just find better ways of managing around that. It's just, it's a management game at the end of the day. But like you said, 12 weeks isn't a long period of time. But after 12 weeks, we know what hurts, what doesn't. And we kind of know exactly the path we need to go on from there. And that helps us build a long-term plan.
Yeah, just so important that. So finally, what would you say to somebody, any advice, I guess, to anyone who's on their rehab journey? Maybe they've been dealing with some pain. Maybe their goal is quite gym related, powerlifting or bodybuilding, and they're maybe just struggling through that a little bit. What advice, given your history, would you give that?
It's not the hardest thing you'll ever do is have to take weight off the bar. But, sometimes we have to do that. We have to take the weight off the bar, take stock of what we got and go from there. The other is that if you're working with a health professional, don't be afraid to ask them, how does doing this get me back to benching 150 kilos? How does doing this get me back to squatting? If they can't answer that question, move on. Because you're rocking up with a yellow TheraBand and hitting some clams, hitting some shoulder rotations, it might help activate some muscles, might make you feel a little bit more, but that's not going to help you load. And I think Andrew Locke said this, you can't fix a 200 kilo problem with a 2 kilo solution. So work with a clinician or a coach that actually knows how to get you there and ask them questions. They should be able to answer it. If you're doing your programming, why are we doing this? There should be an answer. If there's not an answer, that's one of my red flags. I think it's just watch out for red flags if you're trying to get that extra support. Because every second Instagram bio will say, injury prevention, injury management. Doing face pulls on the cable is not injury management. So being able to actually ask those questions, get those results, talk to people that have worked with them. But my big thing was like, if you are injured and you're struggling to go through, just reach out, talk to people. I know myself and Dan, for example, we do free discovery calls because we're happy to chat about it. And we might have a chat and go, look, you might need a little bit more help, or you might need some different help. And we refer you off to people that might be more suited. So ask for help. And if you're struggling, take weight off the bar if you need it, because you'll always have time to put it back on. If you don't take the weight off the bar now and injure yourself, it's going to be a very long time before that weight goes back on.
No, I love that, especially on the rehab front. I think, obviously, I see it in our world a little bit that people often they'll just be given the same rehab stuff that, a 7-year-old sedentary man might get, some banded work, something very light, and it's not specific to that person, especially when you're lifting heavy weights. And I love that quote from Locke, the 200 kilo problem can't be fixed with a 2 kilo solution. And it's, it's absolutely as true as truth gets in this field. And too often we find people are just doing some banded work or very light work when their goals are well in excess of, what they're currently doing in the rehab. And the purpose of good rehab is it prepares you for those heavier loads. And from my end, I always say to people, get a good coach, because the best injury prevention is an amazing coach. If you have injuries, yes, get your rehab done, build yourself up, get to a point. But the reality is, if you've got a good coach, say like yourself, who has a really good knowledge on good, sustainable, performance-based programming, that is about as good as you could ever get in regards to the injury prevention side of things. So that's always my advice to people. You don't want to be doing this stuff alone, especially if you've got higher goals, like in the powerlifting, bodybuilding, Olympic lifting world as well.
Yeah, 100%. And then I look at the Olympic lifting side. If someone comes to me and they're like, I want to do Olympic lifting, it's not my specialty. I refer, because not knowing how they program and not knowing what they need is just lining them up to be injured again. So that's where it comes in with talk to the right people.
Yeah. Amazing. Mate, well, I really appreciate hopping on today. Always insightful. I love to hear your perspective. You've just got such a nice balance of the rehab and performance world. And although you're not, quote unquote, a rehab professional, I genuinely think you are, without that, official title. You got that base knowledge that is just so vital to helping people get better. And everything you talk about is completely in line with all of that anyway. It's the same science. It's just different ends of a bit of a spectrum.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in rehab for injuries since 2011, so 14 years. I should pretty much get an honorary degree at the end of that one. So,
That's right.
um,
Not one
but
you might have
yeah,
wanted.
I just, yeah, not the way I wanted it. But it just comes down to, it's something that I enjoy. It's something I've experienced myself, and if I can impart that knowledge across, then I see that there's no reason why I shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for
All right,
hopping on. I
Dan, thank
really
you so much for
appreciate
having
it.
me today.
We will see you soon.
All right, catch you, Dev.